I'm good, Amy. How are you doing?
All right, thank you. Thanks. I think we are one away from quorum, maybe. Let me see. Oh, no, we're good. Actually, we do have quorum, but let me just double check. Yep, we have quorum. Madam Chair, we can start whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, members of the MAG Human Services Technical Committee. This meeting is now called to order. It is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube as a way for members of the public to participate. Please state your name when you're making a comment or asking a question, and I will ask that you keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking. We will now begin in the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, when I call your name, please unmute and let us know your affiliation. Karen Bishop. We can't hear you, but Elizabeth.
I saw her that she's in the meeting, but I'll say present for her.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. Proxy for Karen Bishop with City of Chandler. Santiago.
Present, City of Tolleson.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dykstra.
Here in Town of Gilbert.
Thank you. Seth.
Seth Dyson, City of Surprise.
Thank you. Jerry. Eliana.
Here with Valley of the Sun United Way.
Thank you. Susan Howlett. Mary Lynn.
Here.
Thank you. Emily Keeley as proxy for Lisa Maddox.
Present, City of Peoria.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
I'm here.
Thank you. Heather Patel.
I am here, Heather Patel with Pinal County.
Thank you. Kira.
Leah Scott still here.
Thank you. Jason Matthews as proxy for Sean Pierce.
I am present.
Thank you. Chris Charlo.
Chris Charlo, City of Tempe. Here.
You are. Amber.
Good afternoon, everyone. Amber Wakeman, City of El Mirage.
Thank you. Christian.
Christian Zabrowski, City of Bucca.
Thank you very much. And Jess, are you here with someone? Jess Martinez. We can't hear you.
Oh, I don't think her audio came through. She's our new coordinator. She's with me.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Madam Chair, we have quorum.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Our next item is a call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction or that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Members of the public could submit written comments via the MAG website 2 hours prior to the meeting. Amy, I don't think we have any written comments. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct. We have not received any written comments for this item or for any other item on the agenda.
Great. So then the next item is for the approval of the December 12th, 2024 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have any questions or comments or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. Amy, do we have any written comments for this item? Thinking no also. Okay. Great. So hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, this is Jason. So moved.
Thank you, Jason.
Second.
Great. Thanks, Melanie. So we have a motion from Jason and a second from Melanie. We will now have members take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. If you cannot or do not wish to turn on the cameras, we'll conduct a roll call vote. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. Can I have a voice vote for the members? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed say nay. Great. Amy, is there a need for a roll call?
a voice vote and the motion carries.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Next up, the real meat of the meeting today. As we discussed last month, we're considering a new committee structure that will help us align regional planning with local priorities in a more efficient manner. The draft proposal was shared as a part of the agenda packet. I'm hoping everybody got a chance to take a look. It's an important conversation for our committee. Many of us have served on this committee for several years. Others are new and may feel surprised by this change. So I want to make sure that the committee, which itself has been around for nearly 50 years, has a chance to talk through these proposed changes, understanding that they're not being made lightly. They're based on extensive outreach and very importantly, the feedback you've provided to date. Amy will be walking us through the proposal, and then if you have any questions or additional input, you will be given that opportunity. Amy?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We can go to the next slide, please. Really appreciate all of your support through this. I've talked with a number of you. We've had conversations about this at the committee meetings about the assessment in general, and in particular about the proposed new structure during our last meeting. For this meeting, this item is on the agenda for action, but really want to make sure that we hear any questions that you might have, any concerns, any suggestions, and then from here it'll go to our Human Services and Community Initiatives Committee. But the first vote is with this committee because you play such a central role in this work and really dedicated to making sure that everyone has a seat on the new bus, that there's a way for you to participate in this new structure. This is the structure as it stands today. So you'll notice that we have 4 Human Services committees within the Human Services Division at MAG. It's this committee, Human Services and Community Initiatives, which are the 2 founding committees of the Human Services Division that was formed back in 1976. Regional Domestic Violence Council just last October celebrated its 25-year anniversary, so a lot of tenure there as well. All 3 committees are part of this restructuring. The Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care, which has also been at MAG for 25 years, is not part of this restructuring at all. They have a very clear mandate from HUD. They have very clear direction from the local and tribal governments through Pathways Home. Their structure will continue as it is today. If there are changes made, it'll be their board driving that. Those changes, if any are made, will not come out of this assessment. This assessment is driving changes for the other 3 committees that you see on the left-hand side and in the middle of your screen. Next slide, please. So based on your feedback, based on 102 different surveys, almost 36 different interviews, and the insights that we've heard during your committee discussions, this is the proposed new structure. We would dissolve the 3 committees, the Human Services Technical Committee, this one, Human Services and Community Initiatives, as well as the Regional Domestic Violence Council. All 3 of those would be dissolved, and we would form a new overarching committee, which is our Community Initiatives Coordinating Committee. And that would deploy action teams. And the action teams, each one would have a very specific scope and timeline and set of deliverables. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. What you don't see on the screen, though, is another important element, and that would be the development of stakeholder lists. Think of it like an editorial board. It's a standing group. Their terms don't expire necessarily. They don't go away, but it's a standing group that's on call, and they're on call perhaps to serve on an action team. They could be asked to contribute to and or review a report or a new study, a new set of recommendations, but it's a set of subject matter experts who are there to continue assisting and supporting regional human services planning here at MAG. So it's really important because all of you have incredible expertise in your areas, in your communities. You're absolute experts at the human services needs in your communities. I want to make sure that we can continue a relationship with you in this new structure. So we'll have the Community Initiatives Coordinating Committee, the action teams, and then the stakeholder list. So there's at least 3 different ways to engage in this new structure. So it's not shutting doors and some people won't be involved in the future. Everyone can be involved in some way throughout these 3 different opportunities. The structure that the Continuum of Care has will continue. The way that it is today, it will continue in the future. Again, if changes are made, it's by the direction of their board. So right now we have the Continuum of Care board, and we have actually 9 different collaboratives. And they're undergoing their own strategic planning activity right now. with a consultant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and their board will actually hear the results of their assessment later on this month, the last Monday in January. So the board will be reviewing their recommendations and they'll be moving forward accordingly. But this is what we're proposing today for the 3 committees coming into that 1 committee with multiple opportunities for engagement. We can go to the next slide, please. So the action teams. The action teams is where the action occurs. And this is really, really important because the Community Initiatives Committee, that's really envisioned as being the generalists. It's the leaders in the community, very high profile. They're not going to be getting into the details and into the weeds necessarily. They'll be supporting action and directing action, but the action teams will really be doing that legwork. And this is a really important element. And each action team, most of them will be time limited. Most of them will be responding to a very specific and time limited action oriented scope of work. And when they accomplish that work, then they'll disband. That will create capacity for new initiatives. It'll also create capacity in your schedules so that you can work on different things as well. These are meant to be very holistic. So for example, right now we have a committee on homelessness and a committee on domestic violence and other committees on, say, human services, transportation. One action team could have representatives from all 3 of those and more, which is really important because when we look at the issues, there's so much overlap between issues. You can have an older adult who's experiencing homelessness because of abuse experienced in the home. So there you have 3 different sectors in one person. We need one team to address that. So really excited about the possibilities and the opportunities that these action teams will afford. Some of the teams, though, might either continue meeting year round on kind of an ongoing basis, and some might meet every year, but just for maybe a few months. An example of that is a scoping team. I can envision many of the members of this committee moving over to that scoping team. The scoping team will really have their pulse on what are the emerging needs and trends regarding human services in the communities throughout the region. And they will feed up into that Community Initiatives Committee to say, hey, I think we need an action team on this, or I think we need to make sure that we achieve this in this action team. So it'll be a really, really important function, and that will be a standing action team. Really one of the few. Others that might be annual but time limited. An example of that would be Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We're absolutely going to continue activities in that space. We'll have an action team. They'll probably start meeting, say, over the summer, help us prepare for that October. And then October, they're done. So November, that team is disbanded until the following summer. Also, social services block grant allocation recommendations. I heard loud and clear from you during our last activity to develop those recommendations. That having local input's important. Having your expertise is really important in the development of those recommendations. That's another team. Might start meeting over the summer, work through the fall, and then at the end of the calendar year, disband because those recommendations are now moving through the committee process for approval. Other action teams will be identified as a result of the strategic planning that will be conducted by the Community Initiatives Coordinating Committee and the action teams. So kind of envisioning a larger event, and it might be an event, it could be a series of engagements, maybe virtually. It'll be up to the committee to help determine that and up to the scoping team. But in any case, we're going to be getting a lot of input to determine what is the strategic direction, what actions do we want to accomplish in this next 1 year to 2 years, and how can the action teams help to accomplish that action? So that'll be a very inclusive, very transparent effort, and one that hopefully reflects the priorities of your local communities. Also, when we have kind of big lift projects coming up, like Pathways Home, which is very complex and multidisciplinary just inherently, could very much see an action team being brought together to address what is the next iteration of Pathways Home, the Regional Homelessness Action Plan for local and tribal governments. That was developed with a tremendous amount of engagement and outreach and research. We're going to need an action team to help drive that development and bring it forward. Next slide, please. So again, there are multiple ways to engage in this new structure. I know it might seem odd, and honestly, it's a bit daunting for me too to say, well, let's not continue this committee. When you have quorum and you're engaged and you're experts in your fields, I want to make sure that we have a seat for you in this new structure. So there are multiple ways for you to engage, and we hope that you'll find one that really resonates with your capacity and with your interests. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline. Again, this is the very first vote, and really looking forward to any input that you might have. So this is on the agenda for action. It will go to our Community Initiatives Committee the existing one, next week for action as well. We do have a DB council meeting scheduled for next week on the 23rd that we'll be discussing this new structure with them for the first time. So it is on their agenda on the 23rd for possible action. I don't want to force them into a vote the first time they're hearing about it. Don't want to force them into a vote at any time. So we'll be offering a second opportunity if they choose that to vote on it in February, on February 20th. So March 18th, please mark your calendars. I hope everyone can come. We will have our joint retreat here at the MAG offices. We'll be in the SWAR room for the plenary sessions and in the smaller conference rooms for the breakout sessions. We have some great facilitators coming in. I'm really excited. And the purpose of that retreat will be to develop the operational plan, because by then we'll have the votes potentially from all three committees. And so at that point, we'll know that we're offering that action to Management Committee and Regional Council in April. Also want to be able to provide some more details to Management Committee and Regional Council for their consideration and action in April, such as what is the criteria then for membership on that new committee? What does that look like? We'll ask them to approve that in April. And then if they do approve it, then we'll be opening up the application process in May to invite folks to apply to serve on this new committee. With the criteria that's been approved by Regional Council, we'll bring together a team, an action team, to help us evaluate those membership applications. We'll circle back in June to Management Committee and Regional Council for approval of that membership slate. And then in July, we start work. We start work at building the foundation. One of the first things that we'll want to do is to develop a charter with them. So everyone's really clear on what are they doing and how are they doing it. And then in August, we start to implement the operational plan that was approved by Regional Council in June. So we are on track with these next steps and really looking forward to your feedback to further refine this as we move forward. Next slide, please. So here we are. This is the action requested. It's to recommend approval of that new proposed committee structure. Madam Chair, that completes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or suggestions that committee members might have.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy. And thank you for your work on this. It's been a long time since we first started discussing it, but not that long for such a big change too. So exciting. Committee members, are there any questions of clarification or comments, concerns? Melanie?
I couldn't find my other hand button. So just in reviewing, Amy, some of the information that was shared, right now you are going to kick off the kind of the new development of it using the chair of the Human Services and Community Initiatives Committee.
Yes.
And the vice chair from the Domestic Violence Council. So who's currently the chair?
Madam Chair and Melanie, members of the committee. The current chair is DC Ernst from City of Phoenix Fire. The way that we're envisioning the Community Initiatives Committee right now is that it would have it would include membership from elected officials. And so that's why we were looking at the chair of our Human Services and Community Initiatives Committee, and then the vice chair of our Regional Domestic Violence Council, who's Councilmember Ellis. So then we would have two council members. They could serve as the liaisons to the MAG Regional Council. So then you have elected talking to elected. We also understand that sometimes it can be awkward for staff to be serving on a committee with other elected officials, because as staff, typically we defer to elected officials, and we want you to be able to feel free to add your expertise in a candid manner, which is why we would have the scoping team. The scoping team would kind of function in a sense like this committee in terms of doing the legwork to develop recommendations then for the elected officials. Gotcha.
And then as a follow-up, has any of this gone to the HSCI yet, or will the first time be February?
For HSCIC, they meet next week on Tuesday, the January 21st. This will be the first time that they are seeing this proposed new structure. We have received favorable feedback from the chair so far. So hopefully for a good conversation.
I know some, like you probably saw a note, we had changeover in our council assignments. And
yes.
So I just probably need to give a heads up as to what this is.
Thank you. And No, and that's a great point. I have received a few emails because it's the season now for turnover, in terms of, the elected officials' terms. And I've been offering that if they want their, new council members, for example, to serve as proxies for the council members who are no longer in office, at least through the conclusion of this transition. And then when the application process opens up for the new committee, then they could apply to be on the new committee. Happy to request any appointments right now, although they might only meet once and probably not even as a full committee member, because by the time the appointment goes through, the committee might have dissolved. So we have those opportunities for folks to continue engaging in a variety of ways.
Okay, so sorry, one more. So once you meet with them next week, do you envision that group meeting at all again, or not necessarily until
The
they-
next opportunity
ahead.
would be March 18th. So March 18th.
if
would
they
be-
wanted to participate as part of the planning group? Yes?
Yes, and actually, March 18th will be a posted meeting for all three committees.
Okay.
So we'll be looking for quorum because we'll want to be able to take action to recommend approval of the operational plan that will be developed. We have that as our next agenda item for this committee because we want to be sure to get your feedback in terms of what that can look like, what that should look like. So then when we bring it to you on March 18th, hopefully folks will be ready to vote on it. I mean, we'll share it with you prior to the meeting, so you have an opportunity to review and provide additional feedback, but we are hoping for a vote at that March 18th meeting. Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
Just to point out that March 18th meeting is for a longer duration.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we'll provide lunch, we'll pay for parking. If somebody
It'll be
needs
in person. It was
it'll be in
really,
person.
yeah, it was really intended. It kind of started, the placeholder had been there back in the early stage when we were thinking that we might be looking for common denominators and working collaboratively with HSCIC, but then it kind of opened us up to the opportunity to restructure in this way, which will be more efficient going forward. So it's kind of going to be looking at all of that at once. It's like a retreat for all of our groups.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, just to follow up on that then, Madam Chair, Amy, if we don't have a quorum on the 18th, does that mean you cannot pass what is produced from there?
If we don't have quorum, then we would be so a couple options on that. One, we would already have action potentially, given that all three committees have the opportunity to vote by February on the proposed new structure. So we could at least move forward with that. If we don't have quorum on March 18th, we could still propose the operational plan and ask management committee for a recommendation for approval. It just wouldn't have prior committee action on it at that point.
Seth?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Amy. I think this is very exciting. So you have my total support. And I was wondering if there were other COGs or associations out there outside of the Maricopa County region that are doing something similar. Is there any precedent to what we're doing, or is there any additional feedback that I may have missed? But not that it's going to change anything. I just think it's exciting. Just thought is there any more context for other groups doing this?
Seth, Madam Chair, and members of the committee, really appreciate that that support. We haven't researched. I'm not aware of other councils of governments undertaking work exactly like this. I am aware of another methodology that I heard about actually after we developed this proposal. It's called a constellation model, and so I've heard that that's similar to what we're proposing. But we're kind of forging new ground with this. And I'm really excited because the focus is on the impact that we can achieve together over the process. And the process is important, but the process shouldn't hold up the impact. So this will be an experiment in achieving more positive impact together.
Agreed. And I would add to that too, like in my mind, I think of it as like the way the Pathway Home initiative kind of took place. That happened completely outside of the Human Services Technical Committee. So, but that's the kind of work that we all were participating in. And so it just added to the number of meetings that we were attending. And meanwhile, we had this regular ongoing group that was supposed to be the Technical Committee for Human Services that wasn't otherwise engaged in it. So it will eliminate that standing meeting on our calendar and give us the flexibility to participate where our strengths are greatest with the specific human and social service topic that comes to light based on our regional needs that are identified. And as MAG members, I think, Amy, we can always be advancing to MAG what we would like them to consider addressing.
Absolutely. And we really rely on your feedback. We rely on you letting us know what's important to you and where MAG can add value. And that line of communication is incredibly important and one that we really hope to even strengthen more through this new activity.
Great comments and questions. Anything else? Or a motion to recommend approval of the proposed new committee structure?
Madam Chair, this is Jason. I move to approve the new committee structure.
Thank
Second,
you.
by Melanie Gilbert.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Jason, a second from Melanie. We will now have members take part in the voice vote again by turning on your cameras and unmuting your audio. And you know the drill. If you can't, we'll do a roll call vote after. Can we get that voice vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Awesome. Do we need a roll call vote, Amy?
Madam Chair, we do not. All cameras were on and the motion passes.
Wonderful. So before we proceed to the next agenda item, I really want to take a moment to honor the courage of you as committee members, because it's far easier to continue on with the status quo than it is to disrupt it and challenge ourselves. So we're trying something new and hopefully better. And I want to thank you for taking this brave first step to creating an even stronger regional human services planning at MAG. And I'm excited to forge a new legacy with you all. So thank you. Moving along, as we prepare to close the door on the old committee structure, we need to begin planning how we will implement the new structure. That joint retreat in March is going to provide that opportunity to develop an operational plan with the other human services stakeholders. So we're looking for your feedback now on what elements can be considered for the plan. So this would include obviously membership criteria for the new committee. Amy is here to gather our collective feedback on the criteria and elements of the plan. So we'll have a jumping off point when we get together in a couple months. I think Amy has a presentation for additional context and will facilitate this discussion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We can go to the next slide, please. So it'd be great to get your feedback on what you would recommend. You have deep expertise in human services, and a number of you have been with the committee for years. Others of you bring expertise from other areas, which is fantastic because it brings it all together to blend just the best of the best throughout the region. So love to get your thoughts on how can we best position this new committee for success. So we want to make sure that we have a strong operational plan in place to help guide what that looks like. This is something that can be updated and we can test drive it, see if it works. If it doesn't exactly in the way that we intended or hoped for, then we can make adjustments. But would love just to get your thoughts up front on what can we put in place to help make them successful. And so, for example, looking at the committee membership, keeping in mind that this committee right now is, we envision that it will meet quarterly. So not as big of a time commitment. We're hoping to get really high level decision makers and policy leaders serving on this committee. And they're not going to come monthly, right? We hope to get them here quarterly or maybe twice a year, but just think kind of at that level, people who can make the decisions right at the table, you know. And thinking about what kind of sectors, I would love to get the philanthropic sector, for example, more fully engaged. I think that would be great. We're thankful to the United Way for their ongoing partnership. There are other foundations who are leaders in this space and would love to be able to offer a voice to them as well. Again, seeing the committee as the generalists. They're the high-level leaders, they're the generalists, relying on subject matter expertise and the technical expertise of the action teams and from the stakeholder list that's serving as an editorial board. So for the committee leadership, as Vice Chair Dexter had noted, we do outline that a little bit in that proposal document that you have in front of you in terms of Vice Mayor Garland, our current chair of our Human Services and Community Initiatives Committee, and Councilmember Ellis, Vice Chair of our Regional Domestic Violence Council, being the founding leadership for the committee. But then who else do we need to really be in the mix, and how might we think about that leadership structure moving forward? Will it always be two elected officials, or would it be an elected official and maybe the director of a foundation or nonprofit? These are some of the questions that we'd like to think through. Would love to get any guidance or thoughts that you might have on how those scopes of work are determined for the action teams. I think that having a scoping team will be really important to help tee them up. And then I'd love to get your thoughts on who else should be part of that process. And then if you have any thoughts or feedback on scheduling for the strategic planning retreat, is that something that we do every year? Is that something that we do every other year? Is it as needed? Just love any feedback that you might have. We've been in a lot of meetings together. We've done a lot of really good things together. So it'd be great to build on that history, to build on that trust, build on that communication, to forge us forward. I'd love to open it up. Thoughts on committee membership, leadership, action teams, what's on your mind? Oh, that was a short conversation. Talia, can we go back one, please? Or Jeremy? Sorry. Thanks, Jeremy.
Does anybody want to go first, or I'm happy to make some comments or suggestions? I like the fact that we've had East and West Valley representation. And I think it's been really important to balance. And I think that's important from a leadership perspective too.
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of the integrity of the group, and preserving that, I think keeping that somehow at the leadership level will be important to preserving that integrity. And I also think that it would be a great idea to have some executive director level nonprofit professionals participating with the electeds, because it will provide an opportunity for the electeds to be fact checked by subject matter experts during discussions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the East Valley, West Valley. Just to note in transparency, the current proposed chair and vice chair for the new committee are both East Valley. But we agree that having a geographic balance moving forward would be very important. It's more so by their position with the two committees, as opposed to that geographic balance initially, but agree wholeheartedly that geographic balance should be represented in leadership as well.
And I don't know if it's necessary for the vice chair to always ascend into the chair position. Maybe instead of a chair, vice chair, it's a co-chair kind of position. And so that will open the door to when the existing terms expire, they could be replaced by a East and West Valley.
Thank you. Other thoughts, particularly in terms of committee members that are not elected officials? So coming from the nonprofit sector, agree executive directors at the level that I think we're striving for. Would you have recommendations in terms of which agencies, keeping in mind that this is intended to be kind of the general list? Group?
Madam Chair, and Amy, this is Jason. I'm looking at that idea as far as like, those high priority sectors and, local and tribal governments, philanthropy, journalists, nonprofit agencies, and those individuals with lived experience. I know like, it's kind of one of these things, like, I think if you're going to have like, say, philanthropy, for example, just ensuring that we either we're targeted in our approach for the reason why, or we extend an invitation to everybody. So like, and just making sure that you're not excluding anyone.
Right.
So like, now granted, like just in the philanthropy kind of space, there's not a ton of those individuals, not a lot of those organizations that are out there. But there is quite a bit. And just, now going down a hypothetical kind of a situation, what happens if they all say yes, right? And what does that do to the composition of this particular group? And, so that those are just some things to kind of think about. So maybe it is more of like having like a philanthropy seat that represents everybody. And I'm just kind of picking on that one particular one. And maybe there is a generalist nonprofit seat, for example, and even you can kind of, play that out for some, just play it out to see how that works. And again, just making sure that you're getting the kind of body that you're hoping for the decisions you're hoping to do, right? And so, and just sometimes the composition can kind of drift the conversations in many different kinds of ways. So that was just more of a general comment.
Thank you very much, please.
Thanks. It looks like Seth has his hand up too.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think it's good for us to think about the who. So thank you for letting us think through that. There's lots of great people out there. My question is the how. How do people get selected? And maybe I missed that already, so sorry if this is a redundant question, but if there are executives out there that want to do, who gets to pick them? And how do they get on board? Is that a MAG thing? Is that a committee thing? And then if it's a committee thing, who's on the committee, right? So, and my last thought would be, I love the executive directors of nonprofits and philanthropy. I think even a couple business leaders whose businesses do invest in community through volunteerism or through philanthropic initiatives. I think that could be very useful for public sector thinking to kind of emerge. So I'm not sure what that looks like. We all, I think, know some business leaders who would be probably interested in this and giving back. And I think they could be high value. It's just, I'm not sure how they get seated. So.
No, that's a great question. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Seth, we'll have an evaluation team. So we'll be looking for people to serve on that evaluation team. Thinking about who's on that team, I think is important. It'll be good to think through kind of the roles, the types of people, agencies that we want to serve on that team, because they'll have a considerable amount of influence on the process. And so I agree, it's really important to think through that. In terms of the business leader, yes, absolutely. We want this to be a holistic response. And in particular, I do think it's really important to think about seats, because a question I have for you for this group is, how big do you see this being? I'm hoping not very big, candidly. I'm thinking maybe 12 or so. So that, yes. So absolutely having a philanthropic seat, a private sector business seat, having a generalist nonprofit seat, absolutely. And then a number of elected officials balancing out East, West, Central, and then regional for Maricopa County as well, the Native Nations. So thinking about the seats, and then that can help to bring us to that total number of people. But I think all of that will be really helpful. And then in that way, people would be applying for a specific seat. And then the evaluation team would review it. They might interview the applicants, and then they would develop that recommended membership slate, and that would go to management committee and regional council.
I think along those lines and kind of hopefully touching on the points Jason and Seth have made. Maybe it would be worthwhile to consider aligning some of the seats with like the presumed limited clientele, presumed eligible population from HUD as the service sectors. So then you'd have domestic violence or abuse victims.
Yep.
You'd have physical disability, people living with HIV. I think it is important in the application process that people disclose any boards that they serve on so that we're not duplicative. So like a lot of our elected officials serve on boards of directors, we might not need a representative from a nonprofit organization that has adequate representation among the elected officials.
Absolutely, because where you stand depends on where you sit, and we need to know where people are sitting. What should be on that evaluation? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wonder if we should not include or exclude homeless service providers because that has a leg in the COC. And
another thought to that, Madam Chair, would be actually to have a standing seat for a continuum of care representative to
exactly right. And then who should be on the selection committee, review board? Thoughts?
Wondering if we might want to have a city manager kind of leading that team, because they'll have they'll have that mindset for the policy and the technical kind of coming together. So that could be enough to you.
Is there a, well, yep. Maybe.
Right, and then keeping in mind too that anyone serving on the evaluation team wouldn't also be eligible to apply to serve on the committee.
Right.
So that in mind as well. And so that might be another engagement opportunity for members of this committee that if you want to help serve on the evaluation team, because you know the field really well, I think you'd all have some really good input in terms of provide the most value to that.
I would agree with that statement. Jason.
I do want to come back over to the question as far as the size of the group. I do echo Amy's kind of concern. I think that something that is a smaller in size, that can be a little bit more nimble and have the ability of making actionable decisions, does make more sense. I am all in a huge fan of inclusivity, but I think if we had something that had like 75 people in there, that would have a different level of effectiveness. So
agree. Term
Yes,
limits too, especially for non-electeds who otherwise might not go away. Have an exit strategy.
Well, and just the inclusivity, I think, is achieved through the action teams and through the stakeholders list, and through the other engagement opportunities, and then the people serving on the committee would not just represent their own priorities, their own insights. They would be carrying the voices of the people that they represent. That's the business sector, nonprofit. They would be hopefully caucusing with their.
Yeah, but I think that there could be particularly if the nonprofits that are represented in those seats are some of the ones that benefit from the larger investment of regional dollars. It could look less open to competition for the funding.
Absolutely. So we'll need to be very mindful of that. And maybe that's part of the application process too, is just ask that they're receiving funds during the kind of process.
But I don't know that that should necessarily keep someone from being able to participate because they have that experience. I just think that the opportunity for people to cycle through in the leadership role should be there because, to your point, they can continue to participate on the action committee level.
You mentioned term limits. I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on, would you see members serving staggered terms? So maybe half roll off at a time?
Yeah, if you're looking at 12, if you're looking at like 24, I would say a third.
Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts or input on scopes of work, schedule? Does quarterly work, do you think, for the kind of high level decision makers? We could start off quarterly too, and then if we need to eliminate a meeting or add a meeting, we can do that as well.
Well, and especially I think in the early stages, Amy, it will give you and your staff time to compile the information and response that the group is looking for to inform their conversations.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense.
Christian.
Hey everybody. So in terms of trying to make sure that the group doesn't get too big but can cover as much geographical ground, maybe if those philanthropy or nonprofit agencies that cover different parts of the valley, if maybe they have some kind of I don't know if preference is the right word, but just recognition that we're covering just more part of the valley with one representation.
Excellent point. Any other feedback?
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Just I imagine a number of you have been involved with kind of starting up new initiatives, new groups, and just wondering if you had any other advice from your experiences to do that, or your experiences going through and wishing it was different. Fine, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Seth?
I'll just share an idea. I think this may not be popular, but I think Mr. Jason from Maricopa County and the City of Phoenix Human Services Director have so much influence because we all work with them, we all partner with them. Maybe having them as so Jason, I'm totally putting you on the spot, but as part of the leadership team because of everything you guys touch. We all are subrecipients somewhere. And so not having them at the table, I think could be more detrimental than not. So that would be just my opinion.
I would agree.
Sorry, Jason.
I would, that's very nice. And you know, I think anyone on this call would be an amazing leader on this space. And I think, in all seriousness, that's very kind. But I do feel that, you know, I think that's really kind of getting into like what's the scope and what's really like the outcomes that this group is really wanting to have served. And I'm always very mindful that that they're there is a balance between those larger kind of entities and also smaller ones as well, right? And I think that you never want to lose sight because sometimes I think everyone on this call has been in versions where sometimes the bigger players can be a little bit more dominant in some of those conversations. I don't think it's intentional. Sometimes it just happens that way. But making sure that there's still a space for everyone else, that's in that space too. And I think that there's lots of opportunities. So just be mindful, and maybe that's as we think about seats. Yeah. And you can make the same argument, like, should, someone from DES be on this call, or some of the stuff with the planning side of it, just because that DES funding kind of impacts so many of us, for example. So, I mean, yeah, that's another way, again, humbled, Seth, by the thought, but I think it's just making sure that we have a comprehensive view of all of the different representatives and for the intended purpose and outcomes for the actual group.
Those are excellent points, Jason. I would add to that rationale that maybe a leadership position should be reserved for a smaller player, but I do think, the county and Phoenix really drive a lot of the work that is happening. And so if it doesn't have it'd be nice for the county and Phoenix to have an opportunity to raise any red flags or voice any concern before a policy type group starts trying to get too far down a road.
Sure. And
so being present for the conversation, I think, might be valuable, but your point is taken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that taking some guidance from Amy and Mag, because you work with that space all of the time, especially when it comes to, regional council and management and all of those other different groups. And so, yeah, there might be some really good best practices that the MAG staff can lend to that.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Jason, and members of the committee. I do think particularly with the scoping team, that would be particularly important to make sure that we have the county and Phoenix included or at least invited to join that team. And that could be in our leadership role as well. Great point, Seth. Thank you for raising that.
All right. Did you get what you need from us, Amy? Does anybody have any additional thoughts they want to pop in there? Or I'm sure you can email or call Amy in the meantime.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Really appreciate this feedback. I'll be following up with a draft and really hope that you'll just dig into it and let me know of any feedback. Happy to meet with folks one-on-one as well, if that's helpful to you. And I'm confident that working together, we can put together a really strong draft that we can offer on these.
And if you haven't already, please open your Outlook calendars and put March 18th from 10 to 2 on there as a hold and allow for drive time to get down to MAG, because that will be an in-person meeting. And we need your perspective as we launch this new phase. So thank you all. Are there any requests for other agenda items at that March 18th retreat? It's going to be a pretty full. All right. Does anyone have any brief updates or news to share with the committee? As a reminder, if there are questions for one another, we need to wait until after the meeting for those. But anyone have any good news to share? No good news. Christian does. Right on.
Yes, I do. So I think that's perfect follow-up to the last meeting and the panel on our dementia-friendly cities and initiatives across the valley. today was the very first Memory Cafe held in Buckeye. It was an amazing success from mayor down. So it's just a really, really exciting phase we were stepping into. And like what we just discussed in creating these committees, seeing how these action teams can put something into action in reality, it's super exciting on both fronts. So yeah, we're really excited about what we got going on right now.
Congratulations. That is great news. Anybody else? Ellie, please help me.
Eliana.
Eliana.
So I'll share that Valley of the Sun United Way is gearing up for our next competitive grant process. This is a process that is open for Maricopa County nonprofits and schools, really focus around the impact areas of education, workforce development, housing and homelessness, and health. So I'll drop in the chat box, or never mind, it's disabled. But if you go to vsuw.org/apply, you'll be able to see we do have some application orientations coming up so that folks who are interested can learn more.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? All right, then we are going to adjourn this meeting. It's a bittersweet moment as we stand on the cusp of such big changes, and it's been an honor to serve as your chair. On behalf of myself and the MAG staff, please accept our gratitude for serving on this committee. I look forward to working with you in this new structure moving forward. I know we'll continue to do really great things together. And so with no further business, thank you for attending today. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Really appreciate you. Take care.